right, give me 1 second. All right, here we go. Good evening, good morning, wherever you are, whenever you're watching this podcast. I am Reverend Deontay Carroll, host of Turn Up the Volume podcast, and I'm excited to be here yet with another edition, another guest, another topic, and we have a very special guest. His name is Michael C. Bender. Michael C. Bender. He is a senior White House reporter for the Wall Street Journal, whose coverage of President Trump has been recognized for its deep sourcing, balance, and valuable behind-the-scenes portraits of Trump's administration and presidential campaigns. Bender was awarded the Gerald R. Ford Foundation Journalism Prize for distinguished reporting on the presidency in 2019 for that set a consistently high standard of reporting and provided a valuable chronicle of the president, his team, and the movement that has reshaped American politics and national policy. And he is the author of the hot bestseller, Frankly, We Did Win This Election, the inside story of how Trump lost, which I think is an interesting choice for topic. How you doing, Michael?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me on. I'm super excited to be here.
Listen, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule for coming on. And I just want to say shout out to your team, Megan and Estefania. They
Yeah.
were professional. They were timely in their responses. They got me the book. I was able to dig into it. You and I were talking earlier before we got online about how I mark up my books, and I really go through with a fine print. And I'm just excited to be here with you. Shout out to you, all your work. We are wishing you the best and success. And we want to make sure that book goes up to the #1 bestseller list because it is an awesome read. And I just
Now you're
want to
talking.
get into this book, man. It is a hot topic. So listen. So let me ask you this: why the topic? Because the
hmm
topic is frankly we won the election, and then it's like the subtopic is how Trump
Yeah.
lost. So why
Yeah.
the topic?
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
did you
No,
choose that topic?
it's a good question. So the title comes from the speech that Trump made on election night, November 3rd, after 2 in the morning from the White House,
Hmm.
and we did not know who the winner was yet. There were
Yeah.
still a lot of counting happening in multiple states all over the country. And except what Trump does is he goes out after like 2:30 in the morning and tells the country that, frankly, we did win this election. No, he didn't. He hadn't, and not even Biden hadn't won at that point. It would be 4 more days before the election was called. So I just thought that was just such a quintessential Trumpian moment of him kind of imposing his own reality on the situation and things, how he wished things to be instead of the way things were or the way things are. So it's kind of just a little bit of a playful title, which is kind of why I view the title as the one big long title, right?
Yeah.
Frankly, we did win this election. The inside story of how Trump lost, because we know he lost.
Yeah. So, so most people will wonder. Okay, first of all, you detail a lot of
hmm
conversations,
hmm
a lot of facts, and there's a lot
hmm
of things that you talk about in this book
Yeah.
that only sources will be able to tell. So
hmm
for my listeners who are unaware of who you are, how are
hmm
you? Who are you? What is exactly that
Yeah.
you do? How were you able to get a hold of this information? Were you in the rooms? Did you have personal conversations with former President Trump? Did you talk to some of his aides? Like, how did you get all of this information?
Yeah. I wanted the book to read like a movie, like right,
Hmm.
like a story, not like a newspaper article. I want readers to feel like they're in the room for these conversations,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of the way I write it. And so how did I do that? I've been a journalist for 24 years. I've
Yeah.
worked at newspapers in Ohio, in Colorado, in Florida, and in Washington for the last 8 years. Um, I worked for the Wall Street Journal. I did apply. It's a very rigorous standards at the Wall Street Journal to get into the newspaper there.
Yeah.
And I applied a similar kind of standard on this reporting. So what did I do? I interviewed over 150 people
Mm-hmm.
it, from the White House, from the campaign, Trump's friends, Trump's former advisors, and used information from those interviews, as well as text messages, private text messages that were shared with me, internal White House documents, campaign memos, to recreate conversations and recreate moments. And everything I learned, everything I was told, I went back and asked other people in the room. There are no scenes in this book that where there's dialogue just between two people in a vacuum. These are conversations that happened in rooms that I was able to verify from other people in the room that it happened. Like there's nothing in here that one person told me and made the book. Everything in here, every detail in here, is double sourced, at least has been verified by someone else who was in the room at the time. And yeah, and I also have, I've been covering Trump since 2015. Like I know the people. I know Trump. I know the people
Mm-hmm.
around him. I've interviewed Trump in the Trump Tower, in Air Force One, in the Oval Office. I went down twice to Mar-a-Lago after the election, at his invitation,
Wow.
to talk for the book. So he's a source in this book too. I hope that kind of. You read some of my kind of credentials
Yeah.
at the beginning. Like I take this really seriously, right?
I
And
know.
I'm trying.
Yes, you
I
do.
want to tell a good story. And this is the other thing too. I've written 1,100 stories about Donald Trump for the Wall Street Journal, right? Like I
Wow.
don't really want to read another story about like I know all that, so I want to write it. I tried to write this in a way that would appeal to someone like me who knows all the stuff, right? Like I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to inject some new things in here, but also that would appeal to someone like my mom, who is
Right.
raised 7 kids in the Cleveland suburbs. She kind of pays attention to politics. She's kind of voted for the last few presidents based on who the first lady would be.
Mm-hmm.
So she's not really in the like someone who would enjoy this, who's not in the weeds on politics too.
Yeah. So okay, so I asked you. You told me that you talked to former
Hmm.
President Trump in Mar-a-Lago, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
I find that interesting because initially he had a lot of great things to say about you. He talked about how he loved your hair. You had beautiful
Hmm.
hair. He
Hmm.
told your daughter, your very young daughter,
Yeah.
that you're right 80% of the time.
Yeah.
And then you talked to him after the election, so he's pretty much aware that you're writing a book.
Correct.
And now it seems like he's bent out of shape. Why is that? Why do you think, if he knows who you are,
Yeah.
what you do, why do you think he's so bent out of shape about your book?
Yeah, you're right. He singled me out. He's attacked my the reporting in this book.
Mm-hmm.
But Dante, I would say, like, if had he, you're right. I mean, had he disparaged my hair, had he gone after my hair, I would have known he was really upset. So
Yeah.
thank God he didn't do that. And I'm only kind of half kidding there, because
Mm-hmm.
here's what it is he's a counterpuncher, right? He's a fighter. That's what he does. And he saw some of the coverage of some scenes in this book,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in the conservative media, and felt like he needed to fight, to punch back. But here's the thing. I mean, Trump has been aware of this book for 2 years. I mean,
Wow.
we've talked about this book for 2 years. When I interviewed him in the Oval Office in June of 2020, he told me how much he loved the idea of my book and that he wanted to participate then.
Hmm.
It never happened, but he knows how long I've been working on this. He knows how many people I've talked to. I mean, he knows who I've talked to. I mean,
Hmm.
he's
No
uh,
surprise for him then.
yeah. So he knows that people who don't normally talk to journalists talk to me for this book.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what he's that's kind of what he's afraid of. That's why he singled me out and attacked me in my book.
Wow, and it's interesting, and it's interesting. Is you had the courage to write this book. You had the courage. I mean, everything that you said in the book is backed up by facts, by firsthand sources. You didn't do he say, she say. You went to sources. You even talked to former President Trump.
That's right.
And you had a lot of courage to even put pen to paper to write this book. Which brings me to another question that I have about former Vice President Trump, who it seems like he didn't really. Trump said that he didn't have a lot of courage to, I guess, do what he wanted him to do on January
Mm-hmm.
6th during the
That's right.
election. And
Yeah.
so, why is it, do you think, that for a long period of time it kind of seemed like former President Pence didn't have a lot of courage, but yet he had the courage that particular day to do what he was supposed to do?
Yeah. Um, it's a good question. I think, you know, there was really no one. It really wasn't a debate, right? I mean, there wasn't really a choice. Pence had been um, very loyal to Trump for years. I mean, I have a couple scenes in the book that detail that are new. One about how Trump's chief economic advisor, a man by the name of Gary Cohn, was
Mm-hmm.
livid about how Trump had responded to the racial violence in Charlottesville and his
Right.
refusal to distance himself from white supremacists and that that fringe of the party, and told Trump as much in a room full of people, and no one else in the room backed up Gary. Um, and Gary goes back to his office, and a few minutes later, in comes Pence in the privacy of away
Yeah,
from Trump, and tells Gary how proud he was,
I read
right?
that.
And
Yeah.
kind of Gary's, like, well, great, where were you 10 minutes, and that sort of thing, and but Pence had never been in a position where it's either, I mean, there, there was no sound legal analysis. No one was saying that Pence had the power to do this, other than right, and a couple of people that Trump had found who would say anything he wanted them to.
Mm-hmm.
There really, I mean, there was no debate, right? I mean, and Pence had never really been put in a position here where it's choose Trump or, reality. Um, and yeah, I mean, he ultimately makes the right decision, and it surprised a lot of people. It surprised Trump. Trump
Mm-hmm.
didn't think he was going to do it. Trump told me that it was still a question in his mind of whether Pence was going to do it on January 6th or not,
Mm.
which is pretty striking to me. I mean, I think you know I know a lot of people were telling Pence that you have to tell Trump directly and
Mm-hmm.
concisely that you will not do this, that this is not something you can do. And I think there's debate over whether he ever did that.
Now, in my opinion, and based upon how we're looking at this, Trump has a strong hold on the Republican Party. Where it is, there's a lot of people that are, in my opinion, they're scared of Trump. They're scared to go against Trump. They're scared to tell Trump no. They're scared to disagree with Trump or what have you.
Hmm.
Because of what Pence did on January 6th, do you think he has a shot at winning the next presidential election if he were to go up against Trump? Because there were a lot of Trump supporters, who were very upset with Mike Pence. Hence, they were outside saying, "Hey, Mike Pence," on
Yeah,
January the
yeah.
6th. Do you think that Pence has a chance to run for president if he wanted to?
No, I mean, I don't think Pence would ever run against Trump
Uh-huh.
to start with, and Pence is a decent man. He's a polite man, a respectful man. I have a scene in the book where I'm left alone in the Oval Office, waiting for Trump for an interview for the Wall Street Journal, and Pence comes in. He sees that I'm in there, and he comes into the office and asks me about my wife and asks me about my family and how I'm doing, and right, like
Seems like a good guy.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
he's a good Midwestern, polite man. I don't know that that's where the party is. I don't know that the party anymore is made up of like polite, genteel Midwesterners who want to get along with everybody, right? I mean, it's a very, the Trump base particularly is very aggressive and very loud, and they want to be heard, right? They want to be recognized, they want to be heard, and feel like they're not being heard. And I don't know that one that excites those folks.
One of the interesting things that I read in your book was when you got to the part, when I got to the part where we talked about the death of George Floyd, right?
Yeah.
And you detailed former President Trump's response to the video that he saw. To paraphrase what you said he saw it. He didn't even really finish it. And behind closed doors, he showed empathy. But when he got on the main stage, he showed something totally different.
Yeah.
You've had conversations with Trump, so you know him on a little bit more personal basis than a lot of us average Americans do. Why do you think he kind of shifted gears?
Yeah. So start with the beginning of that. I mean, he's a very visceral learner, right? I mean, he's affected by videos and moving pictures more than just still pictures or words or briefings, right? I mean, in the very beginning of the administration, you might remember the United States dropped bombs in Syria based on, after Trump saw a video of a chemical weapons attack there and the effect on children, right? I mean, there's quotes at the time where these, beautiful babies, and he was emotionally affected by this video. And my reporting is that the same thing happened when he watched the George Floyd video. Now, so a couple of things here. One is you have to remember, it took him a couple of days before he even watched it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's an awful 8 minutes of video. Right. I mean, but he doesn't make it through the whole thing. He never actually watched the entire video. He turned it off. And in that moment, the people around him were, said that he was affected, right? That he thought it was horrible, and talking about how cops get carried away, and he knows cops like that back in Queens, and he'd heard stories about that, and it's awful, that's wrong, and right, like things that you don't hear him say in public ever. But what happens, he starts to take it personally. George Floyd's death had nothing to do with Donald Trump, right? The protests that happened in the days after that had nothing to do with Donald Trump. But that's not how Trump sees it. Trump sees it as a rebuke of him and a rebuke of his law and order image, and begins to take it very personally, and decides, right, that okay, well, I've done things for the Black community. He passed a criminal justice reform, that, he, secured some permanent money for historically Black colleges, that was not, that those schools had to fight for every year. And again, those things have nothing to do with what's happening in the streets and, the civil rights abuses, right? But like, he sees the protests and says, well, after everything I've done for them, they still hate me, right? So now, and that just for whatever reason cements in his mind, and he goes, full barrel on the law and order image, to the point where that he wants to shoot Americans, right? He's telling a room full of military officials, and officials from the Pentagon, that he wants the military to shoot Americans who are peacefully protesting civil rights abuses, shoot them in the leg, shoot them in the foot, crack their skulls. I mean, this is not one time. This happens repeatedly. I mean, this is an important point in the book, but in 2020, I mean, this is where things really start to turn for Trump for the worse, is, and long time relationships he has with senior officials in the administration start to turn, and where he becomes, I mean, where these folks, the people around him told me that they thought he'd become dangerous, become violent and unhinged here because he's so desperate to hold on to power at this point that he's willing to talk about these again, shooting fellow Americans over peaceful protest is just shocking.
It's interesting. Okay, so he has Juneteenth last year. We all know he was getting ready to have a rally, around Juneteenth.
He made Juneteenth famous, yeah.
Yeah, he made. You had a chapter. He made Juneteenth famous. So we all know there was a plan to have a rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where the Tulsa Race Massacre took place on Juneteenth last year. At the time, Trump had who was it? Katrina Pearson, the highest-ranking black staffer on his campaign, and Jerron Smith, the West Wing's senior-most black official, who was at the time working on an executive order for Trump to declare Juneteenth a federal holiday. Why weren't they consulted about, in terms of inquiry as to why it's not good to have a rally on Juneteenth? Why is it the fact that it took former President Trump to talk to a black Secret Service agent to tell Trump that he was offended that he was having a rally on Juneteenth? Like, why is it that there's this? It seemed like there was this, we're going to leave some of the black staffers out, especially on issues like that or subject matters like that.
Yeah.
Because clearly he had at least a few African Americans or people of color on his staff. Even though it wasn't as many, he had at least a few. Why weren't they consulted?
Yeah. I mean, the bigger question there, the broader answer here is that this is how Trump world works, right? That the left hand is never talking to the right hand, that it's always decisions are made in the moment by the last, influenced by the last person in front of them. And there's there's rarely a time where he or, takes a breath and says, okay, well, who needs to be consulted on this decision, right? Like there's really no part of the president who that says, all right, this is an issue that I don't fully understand, right? But I have people around me who do, people around me for a reason, right, to help me with these things. And so let's make sure that Jerron's part of this conversation, that Katrina's part of this conversation. That just never occurs. It never occurs to Trump to do that, right? I mean, he brings these people in. He has, good people around him. But if you're not in the room in the moment, then then you're left out. And Jerron Smith and Katrina Pearson were never in the room. I mean, you refer to him as Jerron as the senior most black official in the White House, which is true. But he was at a pay level, several levels below, the top senior officials in the White House. Like, he wasn't really in the room for these conversations. And I think it's indicative, sort of getting more into the moment here and this particular decision. There were no black men or black women around Trump in any real way. I mean, that's what this shows to me, that he has to turn to a Secret Service agent who happened to be black to ask him what he thought about Juneteenth. And I mean, props to that Secret Service agent for telling him the truth.
Yeah. And
telling him, yes, sir, it did offend me. And that's what convinces Trump to reschedule the rally.
I thought that was my favorite part of that chapter, the Secret Service agent, because I said he had a lot of testicular fortitude to tell the president that kind of president who could have his job. He told him, I'm offended. I have to protect you, but I'm offended that you're having this on Juneteenth, because I know what Juneteenth means. But the fact that you're having it there, do you think that Trump really realized a lot of it? Because you said he had empathy about George Floyd, but do you think he realized his rhetoric was dangerous? That it came off to the African American community, that it came off as subtle racism?
Yeah. I think that point had been made to him repeatedly. right? But he was very protective. What mattered more to him were the people who already supported him, right? And he was concerned about offending them. I mean, a similar issue that gets to this point is are all of the military bases in the country that are named after Confederate generals, right? I mean, the U.S. military wants to rename these bases. They will be renamed soon. But when they, and it's an opportunity here. It's a political opportunity. One of Trump's advisors brings him a plan and says, we can name this base in Texas that's named after an actual textbook definition of traitor, right? And rename it as for um, a Medal of Honor recipient who's also happens to be Hispanic, and and we can market that. We can bring that as an accomplishment, not just to the people of Texas, but Hispanic voters. As here is someone who's worthy, an actual hero who's worthy of having a United States military base named after him. And Trump dismisses it. He won't even, he barely even considers it, because he's got people around him telling him, that the right wing, supporters in North Carolina, might be offended by, changing their quote unquote cultural history, or and I mean, those are the calculations that he's making, and as the election's unfolding, and a few of the scenes that are detailed in this book.
Yeah. Dr. Martin Luther King once said the three evils in America are racism, poverty, and militarism.
Mm.
Do you think that Trump upheld these evils in America during his term as president? Has he actually done anything to combat these three things?
Mm. Um, I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, these are the things that, again, that the people around Trump were increasingly worried about in 2020.
Clearly.
Yeah, right. I mean,
Based upon what you wrote, clearly.
yeah. I'm trying to think of like some other scenes that sort of get at this. Whether I mean, Mark Milley, right, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This is the top general of the U.S. military. Um, has to look over, in the Oval Office, has to point to a portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the wall and say, Mr. President, that man had an insurrection. What we have is a protest, right? I mean, Trump wants to, and I mean, for your listener, there's a huge difference. I mean, you're talking about sending in the National Guard. The National Guard is a kind of quasi law enforcement agency. They're trained to handle things like protests. I mean, that is exactly what their training is, a domestic sort of law enforcement role. Even Trump is talking about bringing the 81st Airborne. I mean, those are 25-year-old kids who are trained to kill and take land, right? I mean, that's a very different dynamic. And, that's what people like Mark Milley and the Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, and, Bill Barr, the Attorney General, have to sit there and try to explain to Trump, who even then wasn't convinced, and even then was arguing to send troops into major American cities.
Do you think Trump is a racist? Do you think he struggles with the African American community internally, behind closed doors? Because we did see some things that his niece Mary Trump said in her book and from interviews she had. Do you think that he's a racist?
I don't know. I do think that I do know that there were a lot of people around him who were very alarmed at at his rhetoric, and and again, to sort of bring it back to the book and the details in the book. I mean, I have one scene here from 2018, where he's in Europe. They're going to a World War I memorial, and his chief of staff at the time, John Kelly, has to kind of give him a high-level history lesson of who the allies were, who the enemies were, and what the through line was to World War II. and Trump tells Kelly, well, Hitler also did some good things, right? And like,
I thought that was crazy.
well, that's because it is crazy. I mean, it's right, and that's what Kelly tells them, right? So they have like a mini debate about it, and then Kelly's essentially like, "Don't ever say
Say
that
that, yeah.
again. Like, please God, don't say that in public." Um, and so I know that people around him were always worried that there'd long been a wink and a nod to these far right wing elements of the party and from Trump, and it's a through line all the way till the 2021, the run up to January 6th, where again Mark Milley is concerned that some of the people that Trump is bringing into the administration in these final days in intelligence positions at the Defense Department and other Pentagon roles may have ties to neo-Nazism. I mean, that's what the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is wondering aloud to people like the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and the Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. So people were, there were people very close to Trump that were worried about this sort of thing.
Last question before we let it go. What do you
Yeah,
want readers to get out of this book the most? What is the one
yeah.
thing that you would want people who pick this book up, buy it, to
Mm-hmm.
read all of these pages? What do you want them to get from this?
Donnie, I mean, what I will say is this is there are a lot of Trump. A lot of books have been written about Trump.
Yeah.
Right, whole libraries can be filled. There's more coming this year. This is the only one to date, and I think for the rest of the year at least, that comes at Trump three ways. We have a lot of I have a lot of inside the room uh, details from what happened inside the Oval Office. We've talked about a few of these scenes. A second way, I also go under the hood, behind the scenes of a $2 billion campaign, a huge organization, massive amounts of money that still was chasing their tail at the end of the race, trying to catch Biden. And the third way in is I spent 2 years embedded with some of Trump's most loyal supporters. These are the folks that have been to 30, 40, and I know you and your listeners are not going to believe me, but to 50, 60 Trump rallies, right? To
Yeah.
try, and I wanted to understand why. What was it about them as people?
That made them sacrifice so much, man.
Yeah, I mean, so much time and so much, that they wanted to go back and see this show over and over again. Why? What was
They
it
were
about
addicted.
them as people? What was it about Trump as a politician that he was? What was he selling that they were buying exactly that they were buying? I thought it was an important piece of 2020, but I think it's even more pressing now to try to understand these as we try to understand these folks and why they keep coming. Right? I mean, after January 6th. There's a riot in the Capitol. 500 people have been arrested. People are being put in jail now, right? They went from a Trump rally, to a riot in the Capitol, and yet Trump still draws thousands. To a rally in Ohio last month, thousands more to a rally in Florida this month. So why do people keep coming back? And I think this book starts to, explain that and answer some of those questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Michael C. Bender, let's give it to him. Thank you so much. Listen, y'all go get his book. Give you the cover. Go get his book. Frankly, we did win the election. The inside story of how Trump lost. And Mike, do me a favor. Tell my
Yeah.
listeners how they can follow you, where they can find you.
Oh yeah, I'm on Twitter mostly at Michael C. Bender. I'm on Instagram, Michael C. Bender. I search for me on Amazon to find the books or any of the local bookstores. There's they're taking orders now. We did sell out of Amazon for a couple of days when it came out last week, but hopefully that'll be back in stock here soon if it's not already. Where else? I mean, I'm on. I write for the Wall Street Journal. You can find me there. And happy to engage. Happy to talk about the book. I'm super excited that you were interested and read it and liked it. It really
Oh, I
means
loved
a
it.
lot.
I
Thank you so
loved it.
much.
I loved it. I loved it. My wife would tell you I was in here just I was marking it up and listen, I was so excited to have you on. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. I know you're at home taking care of your babies. Thank you so much for taking the time out to come on this podcast and talk to us.
Absolutely.
Listen, and let's connect on Twitter too, Mike. Connect on Twitter. I'm
Okay.
follow you. Make sure you follow me back, brother.
I will
So we
definitely.
can
I'll do it right now.
stay in touch because it's not gonna be your last time. I'm pretty sure you got some other works and some other things you're gonna be doing. So I always want to make sure we help you out and make sure we push that book to the bestseller list. Okay,
Perfect. Yeah.
because it's definitely worthy of a read. Y'all go get this book. Thank you so much, Mike. Appreciate you. I'm gonna let you go because I know you gotta go.
Okay.
So thank you so much, and let's stay connected, brother.
Sounds good. It's super fun. Thanks again.
Thank you, Michael C. Bennett. Let's give him a hand one more time, y'all. Listen, y'all do me a favor. Do me a favor and follow me on all my social media platforms. At Twitter at Deontay J. Carroll. Also follow me on Instagram at Deontay Carroll. Right there, all one word, no apostrophe. Follow me on Facebook because I do all my shows on Facebook Live at Deontay J. Carroll Sr. Right there, you see on my lower third. Also follow me on YouTube because every time I do a show, once I'm finished, it goes directly to my YouTube page at Deontay Carroll. Follow me. We want to thank my guest that we had, Michael C. Bender, author of the best-selling book, Frankly, We Did Win This Election, the inside story of how Trump lost. And listen, go pick it up. Thank you so much. Next week, we're going to be having a special edition, Turn Up the Volume podcast from my trip in Atlanta. We're going to be bringing you some footage about that. Excuse me, y'all, listen. Make sure you follow, like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe onto this channel. We are trying to bring you wonderful content. And listen, also, if the Lord puts it on your heart, all right, if the Lord puts it on your heart, please drop something in the Cash App at $ DJ Carroll 91. Also, I'm on Zelle at, where is my Zelle? I'm also on Zelle at DeontayJCarroll@gmail.com. It takes money to run the show. We want to continue to bring you wonderful content, continue to bring you quality, and continue to bring you the information that you need to encourage, to edify, to inspire you, and to keep you motivated so that you yourself could continue to be inspired to do wonderful things that you want to do to help empower our communities. And listen, I appreciate each and every one of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to watch this, for going to YouTube, pushing the like button, going to YouTube, subscribing to the channel, going to YouTube, hitting the notification, the bells, and all that wonderful thing. Thank you so much. I love each and every one of you. Shout out to my wife. I love you dearly. We just celebrated 2 years of marriage. Shout out to each and everybody. Listen, there's a lot going on. I know there's a lot on a lot of your minds and hearts and spirits. But listen, don't let nobody take your voice. Don't let nobody shut you down or shut you up. Whatever you got to say, do me a favor and say it with your chest. And until next time, I'm Deontay Carroll, host of Turn Up the Volume podcast. Do me a favor. Until next time, keep that volume turned up. Be blessed, y'all.
Hey, I'm Nadia. I'm DJ. Hey, I'm Seth. And you watching, and you're watching. Turn up the volume. And turn up the volume. Turn up the volume. Turn up. Turn up. Hit the wall. Seth, put the pause.
My name is Lamika Carroll, and you're watching Turn Up the Volume.